The signal flow in Alloy 2 is going to have a lot to do with how the different modules interact with one another. Now let's take a look at the bottom of the interface here, and we can see that the equalizer comes first in this list of all the different modules in Alloy 2, and so you would think that the signal flow is hardwired to go from the input to the equalizer, then into the transient module, then into the exciter, and so forth. However, these buttons do not always depict the signal flow of the modules themselves. The signal flow can actually be changed depending on various different factors, and to change the order of the modules so that you can modify the signal flow and how the modules interact with one another, you would go to the graph button. When you click on the graph button, it opens up the signal flow graph. Now right now with this particular preset called up, it's going through the exciter first, then into the transient shaper, then into the first dynamics processor, then the EQ, then dynamics 2, then the de-esser, the limiter, and finally the spectrum. And I'll talk about the spectrum here in just a moment. But that is the current signal flow. Now let's say that you wanted the equalizer to come before either of the dynamics processors. To change the signal flow, you would click and drag on the module that you want to reposition and drag it in front of the module that you want it to appear in front of. So now the equalizer is in front of both dynamics processors, but usually I like to have the equalizer come after any dynamics processing. So I'm going to click and drag the equalizer in back of the second compressor or dynamics module. Now the modules represented here in the signal flow graph might look a little bit different than mine because some of the modules in this particular preset are set to multiband mode. So the exciter is set to multiband mode and it's very, very tall right here, and it's actually disabled right now so you don't actually see the little lines in between here. The transient shaper is off as well. See how its little block here is void of any icons? But then when we get to the Dynamics 1 module, you can see that it's in multi-band mode, so there's different compression or different dynamics happening on the low frequencies, mid-range frequencies, and high frequencies. So, for example, if we wanted to enable the exciter to be in its multi-band mode, let's come over here to the exciter module and go ahead and enable that module. And then when we look at the graph, now you can see that the exciter is in multi-band mode. However, if we were using a single band mode and we turned off the multi-band option inside of the exciter, now the exciter appears as just one band. And then if we wanted to make further modifications, let's go ahead and turn on the de-esser, for example. And now I can drag the de-esser module at the very, very beginning of the signal flow if I wanted. And finally, let's talk about the spectrum. You see, Alloy 2 has 7 different processors, or actually 6 different processors, and 2 of which are identical. Dynamics 1 and Dynamics 2 are identical. They process the sound the exact same way, but they can have different parameters. And we'll be going over those different options in the 2 different Dynamics processors. But if you count the processors in the graph, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Where's this 8th one coming from? Well, this is the position of the spectrum display in the top of the touch screen. And normally you'd want the spectrum to display the processing of all of the different modules. However, if you wanted to have the spectrum display only the processing of a specific module, you could put it after that specific module. So for example, if you wanted to see what the exciter is doing in the spectrum before it gets processed and displayed through all the other processors, you would leave the spectrum right here after the exciter. Now the spectrum display will be showing us what the exciter and the de-esser are doing, but not showing us what the other modules are doing. So again, typically you would want the spectrum to be showing you the results of all of the processing all at once. So the spectrum would be placed here at the end of the signal flow. But if you had a specific reason to see what the spectrum is doing before the processing of other modules, you can reposition the spectrum here in the signal flow graph. So now that you know about the signal flow of Alloy 2, let's talk about the history and stored settings.